Let's destroy them! Rocket screamed at the humans. Everyone in the room kept silent as they stared at the Uvil freak out. They half expected this. Those are red-scaled! There's dozens of them! He frothed at the mouth. Rocket couldn't believe his eyes. An entire clutch of red-scaled scourge. By the Emperor, there are so many! He was nearly panicking as he lost count at 18. There was still a lot more. Rocket grabbed his head with his good hand and stared at the collection of eggs nested gently in foliage. Rocket, calm down, the colonel said, trying to temper the riled-up Uvil. He stared at them, and then the eggs. What do you mean, calm down? There's... Rocket yelled, but he cut himself off as he thought for a moment. Panic seemed to grip him as he looked at Toivonen, and then at the two humans sitting at the table. No, Rocket said, coming to the realization. No, you can't! You mustn't! He yelled at the group. These humans, they were going to try and tame them? Rocket, Toivonen said with more force this time. The other two humans seemed to lean back and lounge as they observed the newcomer's freakout. You can't control them! They're born vile! Rocket yelled again. His good hand's claws sunk deep into the armrest of the wheelchair out of stress. Rocket! The colonel finally barked. He finally stopped at the sight of Toivonen yelling. Whatever wild delusions you're thinking up, I can assure you we're not doing that, she said with a hint of annoyance. Then why don't you destroy them? He said, pointing at the clutch of eggs. Toivonen's eyebrow twitched. What the fuck? We're not just going to murder some mother's children in front of her, she yelled incredulously. The two other humans looked unassuming as they seemed to be amused as they watched the spectacle. A curly-haired woman with black skin looked at her pale-skinned companion with a smirk on his face. Jake, is the colonel losing her cool? She asked. Jake brushed his hair with his hand and turned to his colleague with an amused grin. Ada, shut the fuck up! The colonel barked in annoyance at the dark-skinned woman, but it caused the woman in question to just snort in response. Just what I need, Toivonen muttered to herself in exasperation. These two shitheads mouthing off while a crippled alien loses his mind in the middle of an interrogation room. She turned back to the literal foamed-mouthed Uvil to try to calm him down. She still needed the only person in this entire base that spoke Kong to cooperate. But cooperation seemed to be out of the question. You can, and you should murder her children! Rocket fought back. Toivonen grabbed her head with both hands and tilted her head back. Jesus, no! We're not going to do that! She shouted. Who is Jesus? And yes, you should! Rocket roared back. The two humans in the back couldn't help it and broke out in laughter. Dr. Greco, who was still behind, had his entire arm covering his face trying to conceal his laughter. Why the fuck are you so adamant about killing babies? Toivonen recoiled in horror. Rocket tapped his head with his good hand, as if he just heard the stupidest thing in the world. They're scourge! And they're not even born yet! We can't kill babies if they aren't even fucking born! He yelled as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Toivonen recoiled her face and contorted in horror. Jesus fuck! That makes it fucking worse! Toivonen screeched. They paused for a moment as the two stared each other down until Rocket broke the momentary silence. Who the fuck is Jesus? He couldn't understand why she was calling for this Jesus. She screamed, covering her face with both her hands. At this point, everyone except the two having a screaming match were basically howling as they laughed their asses off. Look! We're not killing her fucking kids! Her face contorted in pure anger as she jabbed her finger into the Uvil's chest. But... Rocket tried to get out, but Toivonen was having none of it as she immediately cut him off. No! Shut the fuck up! Just shut the fuck up! She screeched. The room kept laughing as she was basically becoming unhinged. There... He tried to get out, but she was relentless. I said shut the fuck up! We're not going to kill her fucking children! That's an order! A fucking order! Toivonen shrieked. She felt like she was losing her goddamned mind. She fucking couldn't believe it. These goddamn Imperials were unhinged whack jobs. The other three were laughing so hard they were wheezing, choking, and squeaking. I can't can't. I fucking can't. Ada wheezed, wiping the tears from her eyes. Dr. Greco was literally in the fetal position in the corner, laughing so hard it felt like he was having a heart attack. Jake was slamming the table with his fist, leaned over in pain, with his face in his arm. Toivonen just couldn't fucking catch a break. She looked around her in adulterated fury. She started pointing at the three, and looking around at everyone laughing at her expense. You! Fuck you! Ow! She screamed and stormed out of the room. Her blonde ponytail bounced up and down as the door hissed shut behind her. Rocket was severely confused. Why in the Emperor's name was everyone laughing? Didn't they understand how serious of an issue this was? They were harboring not only Scourge, but red-scaled Scourge! Rocket looked at the darker-skinned female. Colonel Toivonen called this one Ada. He looked at Jake, the pale-skinned human with shaggy brown hair. Are you Jesus? Rocket asked genuinely. The entire room went through another round of manic laughter. Gasps of air and pounding of desks were the only thing that could be heard, other than the barks of uncontrollable laughter. It took 5 or so minutes before everyone in the room finally calmed down, when the door hissed open to find a slightly recomposed Colonel Toivonen. Now, she said, trying to maintain the air of calm control. She heard a snicker of amusement coming out from the table. Toivonen immediately gave the most hate-filled glare she could muster at the two sitting humans. They both turned their heads, trying to contain themselves, and covered their mouths, trying to conceal their grins. All we need you to do is to translate for us, she said, still trying to keep her cool. Rocket glared at the eggs, and then the Scourge on the other side of the wall. He turned his head towards the colonel, still unwilling to accept what was happening. What are you going to do about the eggs? Rocket asked. Nothing. That's not for anyone in this room to decide. We all have our orders, Toivonen said matter-of-factly. Rocket stared at her hard. He eventually gave a disgruntled sigh and pushed his hand against his eye to relieve pressure building behind it. No amount of education or training will purge them of their horrid nature, he informed, clearly disapproving whatever it was the humans were planning. Have you tried? Toivonen countered. Rocket opened his mouth to retort, but he couldn't find the words. He never really gave it any thought. They've always been the existential threat. They were always the enemy. To be honest, he didn't want to think about it anymore. They weren't worthy of it. The Eyes seemed to always love recruiting the most stubborn people they could find, Jake said with a hint of laughter still lingering on his face. I like him. Maybe we can poach him, Ada added as she played with her poofy hair. Toivonen turned her head and gave the two another annoyed glare. Of course, the mouths want him, she muttered to no one in particular. You're going to go through proper SMC channels if you think I'm just going to give him up, she snarled at the two. Rocket tilted his head sideways at the interaction. What was this SMC, and why was it the decider of his fate? Who were the mouths? Who the fuck was he tasked to exactly? SMC? He asked curiously. Everyone turned their head towards the Uville. Of course you didn't tell him what he got himself into, Jake said, rolling his eyes in exasperation. UDASR, direct action and special reconnaissance. Fox, love your secrecy way too much, Ada added before standing up and walking towards Rocket. I'm Ada, and that's Jack. She pointed to the other human and she stuck her hand out. Rocket cautiously grabbed her hand. SMC is the Special Mission Command. It's the umbrella command structure for the eyes, the hands, the mouth, and the ears, she said matter-of-factly. We're Miso's clandestine wing, Ada finished. Jake stood up and started to walk towards the Uville too. The mouths are the human and sapient intelligence specialists, Jake added. Jake pulled out his datapad and opened the Class 5 Classified Human Capabilities report given to Imperial High Command and slid it to Rocket. Ada and I are interrogators, he said with a wink. Here, read this. He motioned Rocket to read the highly classified memo. Click here for full memo. Ordo Bellum. Imperial Galactic Military. Top secret. From Ordo Bellum Imperador Sibylla Lactuca. To Grand Marshal Thelko Lodianus. Grand Admiral Syra Dorsuo. CC. High Admiral Nadia Asina. High Admiral Fausania Mergianus. High Marshal Lavadit Sasori. Click to expand. 241 more recipients received this memo. Topic: Overview of the human special operations capabilities and structure. Even though the Imperial military incorporates intelligence and elite troops, the human abstraction of special operations and human intelligence is a new and alien concept to the Imperial military. However, the benefits and capabilities of such operations have been proven to be overwhelmingly apparent. Special operations. Special operations encompass the use of small units in direct or indirect military actions focused on strategic or operational objectives. They require units with combinations of trained, specialized personnel, equipment, and tactics that exceed the routine capabilities of conventional military forces. Special operations are characterized by certain attributes that cumulatively distinguish them from conventional operations. These operations are sometimes politically sensitive missions, where only the best equipped and most proficient forces must be deployed to avoid detection and possible mission failure that can result in damage to Imperial prestige and interest. Click to expand. 4 factors for successful special operations. Click to expand. Characteristics of special operations. Click to expand. Characteristics of Special Operations Forces. SOF. Click to expand. Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command. Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command. Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command, MISOC, or MISO, is the unified combatant command charged with overseeing the various special operations and intelligence component commands of the Terran Armed Forces. These operations may be conducted in peacetime or during hostilities. In short, Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command prepares assigned forces to carry out special operations, psychological operations, full-spectrum intelligence, geospatial, geographic, sapient, signal, cyber, media, civil, measurement and signature, and spaceborne intelligence, and civil affairs missions as required. Also, the command plans for and conducts special operations if directed by the Terran Governor, Imperial Emperor, or Ordo Bellum Imperator. MISOC develops and employs fully capable special operations forces to conduct galactic special operations and activities as part of the joint force to support persistent, networked, and distributed combatant command operations and campaigns against state and non-state actors to protect and advance Imperial policies and objectives. Special Operations Principal Missions. Click to expand. SOF Collateral Activities. Click to expand. Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command. Subordinate Units. Click to expand. Special Missions Command. The Special Missions Command, SMC, is a subordinate component command of the Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command, MISOC or MISO, and is charged to study special operations requirements and techniques to ensure interoperability and equipment standardization, to plan and conduct special operations exercises and training, to develop joint special operations tactics, and to execute special operations missions galaxy-wide. The SMC is the headquarters designed to study special operations requirements and techniques, ensure interoperability and equipment standardization, plan and conduct joint special operations exercises and training, develop joint special operations tactics. For this task, the Joint Communications Unit is tasked to ensure compatibility of communication systems and standard operating procedures of the different special operations units. Special Mission Units. The Special Missions Command oversees the Special Mission Units and is subordinate to the Terran Military Intelligence and Special Operations Command. These are elite Special Operations Forces units that perform highly classified activities. So far, only 4 SMUs have been officially formed. The Eyes. Direct Action, Special Reconnaissance, Advanced Force Operations, Clandestine Operations in Non-Permissive Environments, Foreign Internal Defense, Security Force Assistance, Unconventional Warfare. The Hands. Direct Action, Spaceborne Direct Action, VBSS, Visit, Board, Search, and Seizure, Counterterrorism, Hostage Rescue, Combat Search and Rescue, Capturing Value Targets, Clandestine Operations in Non-Permissive Environments, Unconventional Warfare. The Mouths. Human Intelligence, Psychological Operations, Civil Reconnaissance, Civil Affairs, Counterintelligence, Source Development, Foreign Language Expertise, Media Exploitation, Social Media Exploitation, Information Operations. The Ears. Signals Intelligence, Electronic Warfare, Exploitation of Communications, Exploitation of Cyberspace, Cyber Warfare, Cyber Intelligence, Special Warfare Network Exploitation, Information Operations, Geospatial Intelligence, Geographic Intelligence, Measurement and Signature Intelligence. Rocket's eye twitched as he read on. He had just associated himself with a group of honorless scoundrels that specialized in violent subversion. A hand grasped his good shoulder, pulling him away from his thoughts. "Sometimes it's just best to go with the flow," Dr. Greco said with a smile on his face. Go with the flow? What the hell did that mean? Rocket tried to comprehend what the doctor said to him, as Ada went behind him and started rolling him towards the entrance of the prisoner's room. "I want you to translate exactly what she says, word for word, and vice versa," she said with a cheerful smile. Rocket spun his head around as everyone started moving to their positions. Jake slipped on a balaclava, picked up a rifle, and followed behind them. "Wait, what? I have questions!" Rocket said in a panic as they neared the containment room. Ada scanned her biometrics to unlock the door, while Rocket wiggled in his wheelchair in a near panic. "Question time is over, my man. You're gonna have to wait till we're done," Ada said in a sing-song voice as the door hissed open. Donna was startled awake by the sound of the door hissing open, and several familiar figures came through. She groggily sat up and looked down to make sure she still had the oversized tunic the Furless Ones gave her on. Good. She wasn't naked, she thought to herself. When she first arrived, she was terrified. They stripped her down and forcibly washed her. At first, she was worried they would use her like the Overlord, but it turned out they were just treating and dressing her wounds. However, even though she wasn't in danger of being violated, she still wasn't comfortable being completely naked when they arrived. A new worry arose, though. She found she was with eggs. It was very rare for a red one to successfully fertilize a regular Kong. But it wasn't unheard of. When she laid her eggs, she cursed her life. How could this happen to her? She wanted to at least be impregnated by someone who wasn't so vile. The Furless Ones seemed to swarm her. They pointed their weapons at Donna and pinned her to the ground. Donna considered it was maybe for the best. She wouldn't have to bear the burden of raising the damnable being's offspring. As the group of soldiers neared the eggs with their instruments, her mind started changing after each step. It seemed her maternal instinct seemed to override her hatred for the Red Scales. How could she blame innocent creatures for the evilness of their father? Donna started to struggle with all her might, terrified that they were going to try to destroy her eggs. More soldiers immediately jumped on top of her, preventing her from moving. Donna wailed and cried, expecting the death of her children. But the sounds of eggs breaking never came, only beeps of their machines. They were using the same medical machines they used on her to examine her injuries on her eggs. Overcome with relief, Donna settled down and allowed the Furless Ones to do whatever it was they wanted to do. As time went on and the scanning finished, they allowed her to stand back up and scanned her again for any more injuries. She was also overjoyed by the fact that they gave her materials to build a comfortable nest for them. Rubbing the sleepiness from her eyes, Donna finally took stock of the group that came in. It was the usual pair that came to feed her, but there was no healer today. She was terrified that they were going to try to destroy her eggs initially, but those fears were dissuaded by the fact that they gave her materials to build a comfortable nest for them. Donna noticed the darker-skinned alien was pushing another being in a wheeled chair. Ah, that was the Third Imperial that spoke to her in the forest. He was hurt. "Are you okay?" Donna asked with concern etched on her face. The Third One contorted his face in an odd way. Maybe amusement or confirmation. Donna didn't really understand Imperial facial expressions. The Third One then looked up and spoke to the darker one briefly, contorted his face again in a different manner, and looked back to Donna. "I am fine," the Third One said in a heavily accented voice. Oh, this was going to be interesting. Donna could barely understand his thick accent, but at least she could finally speak with someone. However, Donna noticed he didn't look fine. Well, it seemed to be very uncomfortable at the very least, but the two spoke again, this time in length. The Third One seemed to exhale a long and drawn-out breath, followed by a quick slap to the head with his good arm. He immediately looked up at Donna with an almost intense look and renewed focus. Donna tilted her head at the sight. Was this some weird ritual to encourage oneself? Was he afraid of Donna?
"I am here to translate, so they can ask you a few questions,"
the Third One said in his heavy accent. Donna finally got out of her warm and comfortable bed to stand before the group of Imperials. She flicked her tongue to taste the air and stood curiously with her hands clasped together in front of her.
For keeping myself and my future offspring safe, I'll answer anything to the best of my ability,
she said with her head still tilted in wonder. The furless and furred ones conversed for a few moments. She was excited about the prospect of being able to speak to her benefactors. Donna wondered what a lowly one like herself could possibly know that they would find useful. She was just a grower and a conscript. Surely they would be disappointed with whatever information she didn't have.
They are wondering if your accommodations are adequate, and if you're uncomfortable in any way,
the furred one asked. Donna flicked her tongue rapidly, remembering the new joys these furless ones brought. Meat. She'd never tasted meat before. It was truly a wondrous thing.
Oh no, my accommodations have been far better than anything I have ever received. Thank you for your concern, too,
she said excitedly. The furred one recoiled in what seemed to be confusion and turned to the furless one. Then, curiously, he looked at the wall for a brief moment before speaking again to his companion.
That's great. We're happy you're comfortable.
The furred one's face was contorting while talking. Maybe he just has difficulty speaking her language? There were more questions about how she felt physically, and some questions that inquired about her mental state. Donna purposefully did her best to not think about that. That was something to shove deep in the recesses of her mind. Why should she dwell on something so awful when new and wonderful things were in front of her? She got to eat meat, and she got to lay eggs without having to forfeit 3/4 of them as birth tax. Her egg sisters and brothers told her the horrors. They were either taken as warriors or to be meals for the red ones. Although she doubted they'd allowed her to keep any of her children. Time went on as their questions shifted over to her people, and how someone as small as her became involved in the war. Donna wondered that too. She was just a simple farmhand that tended to the tuber fields, and occasionally the flowers of the sky towers. Until just a couple of years ago, the planet was peaceful and serene. Other than the malicious red ones and their habits. But that wasn't an everyday threat. They asked in detail how she and her people used to live, how their social structures worked, and her own personal relationships. Oh, she gushed over the larger farmhand that she used to work with, but then so did all the others. Donna felt grateful, and her brooding thoughts lightened at the fact that she was able to talk to another being, and that they wanted to know more about her.
So, before the war came to this planet, you rode around in the subway system for just work? Or did you go places with your friends?
The furred one asked her in a monotone voice. Donna didn't have that many friends. She did like to go to events and see the few she did have.
Yes, there are a few events in and outside the city,
she answered, remembering a simpler time, a better time. She was in deep thought, remembering all the interesting things she used to be able to do.
That sounds like a lot of fun. The one I'm translating for says she used to do the same with her friends, but she went shopping and ate at restaurants,
the furred one translated. Donna couldn't tell, but the furred one felt like he just wanted to die. She thought he was just having issues speaking her language.
You must be very wealthy to be able to eat at restaurants,
Donna said in almost amazement. Only the wealthy or upper-middle-class Kong got to eat at restaurants. Oh, how she wished to do the same.
If things calm down, maybe she'll take you to one as a friend,
the furred one said, rolling his singular eye. Donna's eyes opened wide, and her tongue flicked excitedly, tasting the air.
Really? I would love to,
she exclaimed.
Of course. You said there were interesting things to do outside of the city. How big is the subway network? Our train network sometimes went to other cities.
The furred one paused for a moment, before he continued as if he were much more interested. Ah, he's struggling again.
Oh, there's a subway network that went around the entire outskirts of the city. They usually went to the dens of the red ones, but there weren't many of those,
she said, looking up and blinking her eyes rapidly, trying to remember the subway map.
I think most of the subway system out of the city just went to 5 large dens belonging to the most powerful red ones that ringed the city, but a few went to the farms, she said.
The conversation continued. The third one was much livelier when he asked Donna about her experience with the subway network and its stops. After a while, Donna suddenly had an epiphany. Were they hiding strategically important questions in what seemed like mild gossip? Donna became quiet as she clammed up. Even as they asked more questions or tried to change topics, she couldn't bring herself to answer any more. The Imperial's questions were starting to get more aggressive now. Was she doing the right thing? How much had she already revealed? The trio of Imperials finally stopped their questions and started talking amongst themselves. A storm ran through Donna's mind as she went over just how much she revealed. Would these Imperials let her live after she had outlived her usefulness? The masked one had the same weapon and calculated cruelty as those wraiths. Donna began shaking in fear as she began to remember the awful noises. The snaps of their projectiles, the blasts of their explosions, the screams. Anxiety and fear gripped her as she stared at her eggs.
Do I have a choice?
She asked herself quietly.
No, you do not,
the third one said in a clearly threatening tone. Startled, Donna slowly backed up the opposite wall, so her back was against it, still hugging herself tightly. The group remained silent as she heard the masked one's weapon make a noise. Click.
Please, don't hurt me,
she begged as she looked between the Imperials and her eggs. The third one spoke to the furless one again. Each second felt like an eternity to Donna. Her eyes darted around looking for an escape, only to realize this was more secure than that awful room she spent weeks in. Weeks without food.
Relax. We're only looking after our own safety,
the third one said after finishing his conversation. Donna wasn't so sure about that. From her knowledge, violence had always been an option.
If you cooperate, you will remain well-fed and the safety of your eggs will be guaranteed,
he continued. Donna knew something like this was going to happen, but she cursed herself a fool for letting her guard down. No one was generous enough to just let her have luxuries and then converse with her as if they were friends. But she was just so lonely.
Okay,
she said, giving in. Like the third one said, she didn't have a choice. She could only hope they'd leave her and her eggs unmolested once they got what they wanted. A hope she believed was naive.
The red-scaled overlord, did he leave before the assault where you saw me?
The third one asked with predatory interest. Donna's words were caught in her mouth as a flood of memories came streaking back. She stuttered.
I'll ask again. Did the red scale...
The third one was about to ask again, but Donna immediately interrupted.
I killed him.